Good morning, good evening to all of the people are listening to this webinar. Thank you for coming. This is Mauricio Beain from Chile in South America. I'm going to give you a brief presentation about working on eNSP, Enterprise Network Simulation Platform, the simulation software by Huawei, where we can test and train and learn about configuration of enterprise products like switches, routers, wireless LAN devices, and security. In this webinar, I'm going to focus on wireless LAN features, wireless LAN topology, and some interesting things we can do at eNSP related to a wireless LAN. Okay. So I'm going to start this little presentation. Just a couple of things I'm going to share with you, and then we are going to do a demo with the eNSP. Okay, well, this is me, Mauricio Bain from Chile. I work as a trainer and IT networking consultant. Like 15 years experience in the IT sector here in Chile, doing training and some things related with it. Related with Huawei. From 6 or 7 years, I am related with Huawei Chile, training the partners and people who want to learn about Huawei technologies, but also have been related with other vendors like Cisco, Fortinet, and something like that. I hold a small company in Chile called nettrainers.cl. In that company, we train companies, employees, IT departments about all these technologies. Cisco, Huawei, other vendors, and I am with other trainers also. These other trainers has other specialities. We also have a YouTube channel, Net Trainers TV. You can find it on YouTube. We have 500,000 approximately video views, some kind of 3,000 subscribers, and we have a Huawei playlist, especially for Huawei, about 60 videos about Huawei. I think it's the most complete playlist about Huawei tutorials in YouTube. I haven't found another YouTube channel with playlists about Huawei configuration. Well, since 2013, we are working with Huawei Enterprise Chile to train the partners. And my website is nettrainers.cl or nettrainers.net. You can also find it that way. Well, what would you learn in this webinar? Well, some wireless LAN features presented on eNSP. eNSP, if you don't know, it's a software simulation as a network simulation for Huawei products. Not all products, just the enterprise and some kind of products like switches, routers, wireless LANs, and security firewall. That kind of products you can emulate on the eNSP, and it works as a learning tool and training tool in order to for people who are learning, or also in company when they are deploying new devices, new network, they have to make some kind of project in order to test some things. They use also eNSP. Um, we're going to review some wireless LAN features on eNSP. We'll be working on a topology where we could integrate the wired and the wireless services. Um, and we will understand different modes of wireless, excuse me, uh, wireless and access points and access controller configuration. Some wireless LAN features on eNSP, the most important, the focus, the main subject of this webinar, the wireless LAN features. Well, eNSP is a very unique tool in the market because you can integrate a wireless LAN into the wired LAN all in the same topology, and you could work with access points and access controllers. I think I said it's a unique tool because you don't have this ability in other platforms for emulating networks. Access points, it's impossible to emulate or virtualize. Just in other platforms it's not possible. You have to have a real access points, and access controllers. All they are possible to virtualize, but in eNSP you could integrate both access points and access controllers working on the same virtual environment. Access points are FIT APs or FIT access points. FIT, it means that all configurations are made at a centralized device called the access controller. The access point doesn't have a command line interface, a powerful command line interface to configure the access point. Configurations is not made at the access point itself. All the configurations are made at the access controller in a centralized way, and the access controller deploys all the configuration to the access point. In other platforms, you know these type of access points as a lightweight access points. In Huawei, they are called FIT access points, and the autonomous access points are called FAT access points. Okay, but in eNSP, you could work with FIT APs, that the most common in deployment at enterprises. The most important device to configure when you deploy a wireless LAN are the access controller. In other platforms, you know this device as a wireless LAN controller or WLC. But in these devices, in Huawei, excuse me, in Huawei, these devices are known as access controller or AC. At the eNSP, all the configuration is done at the CLI command line interface, but there is also a web interface, but it's limited and not support all features. So the most recommended way to learn and test and learn how to configure a wireless LAN is doing by the CLI. At eNSP, you could emulate the direct and tunnel modes. We're going to get deep on the differences between direct and tunnel modes. You could also do an easy framing visualization with Wireshark, because eNSP is integrated with Wireshark, so you can see all the frames, all the traffic that is passing through a cable, a wire, or you have to monitor some interface. You could open a Wireshark in that interface and monitor all the frames that are passing, all the packets, etc. In the eNSP platform, you could also work with a wireless distribution system. A wireless distribution system is when you work some access points as a bridges. So you can extend a wireless LAN wirelessly. So you could work access point as access point it's properly, but also as bridges. And also you can deploy a agile distributed wireless LAN topology. Agile distributed wireless LAN is a special solution from Huawei in order to, especially designed for some kind of environments where you need a huge amount of access points because you need a huge coverage, no shadows, all, everything is going to be covered because wireless LAN connectivity is critical. For example, a hospital, when you want to have a lot of devices, for example, patient devices, monitoring health devices, doctors devices, all connected to the wireless LAN and transmitting all the time. And you have to have a connectivity that is full, all places in the hospital. So in order to do that, you will need a huge amount of access point, and this will be very expensive. So there is some kind of access points special design for these purposes in Huawei. Uh, they are like just radio features access point, very simplified access points that are like controlled by a centralized way, and these are called the agile distributed wireless LAN. So this kind of solution is also could also be tested on eNSP. Well, eNSP is a very good tool for studying for HCIA, routing and switching, wireless, also security features. And eNSP is also a good tool for studying some topics of HCIP, routing and switching, not all topics, but the most. And also it is used for studying HCIE. Next slide. Well, getting deep about wireless LAN features on eNSP, mostly most of the deployments in eNSP, when you configure access points, you will put access points and you will set an access controller. And DHCP services is critical because access points is going to discover the access controller in the topology. So there should be some device like a router, like a switch, or the access controller itself that has to provide DHCP services. And the option 43 is done to signaling a wireless LAN controller or access controller to the access point. So the access points are going to discover the DHCP server, and they're going to learn option 43 and what is the IP address of the access controller they have to register on. So the DHCP service is very critical when you deploy a wireless topology. At the access point, there is also the possibility to statically configure the IP address of the access point, the subnet mask, the default gateway, and the IP address of the wireless controller. It is a possibility, but in most deployments, the most typical and easy way to get done is via DHCP. Access controllers manages the access points through a standard protocol designed for that. It is the CAPWAP protocol, Capabilities and Provisioning of Wireless Access Points, request for comments 5415. This is a standard protocol for managing access points, like a control plane between the access point and access controllers. Other protocols in the industry are proprietary from different vendors, but Huawei is working with the standard This is CAPWAP, and CAPWAP uses it's like an application protocol that that has a UDP port for control messages and a UDP port for data messages. So CAPWAP is like an application layer protocol. Okay. As I mentioned before, in eNSP you could work with channel mode and direct mode. What is channel mode? Well, channel mode, when you configure channel mode between the access points and the access controller, all client traffic, I mean layer 2 frames, are encapsulated. The traffic is encapsulated in CAPWAP messages. All the traffic from the clients are encapsulated in the CAPWAP payload of the CAPWAP messages between the AP and the AC. So if you're using a VLAN for the CAPWAP traffic, the AP management VLAN, so if you're using some VLAN, well, all the client traffic is encapsulated on that VLAN. So from the point of the switched network, there is just one VLAN, the VLAN for the AP management, because inside that VLAN are all the traffic from the clients. They are channeled. So this is the name, okay, channel mode. There is another mode, direct mode. This is the default mode. In direct mode, CAPWAP messages use a management VLAN. Of course, the traffic between the AC and between the AC and the IP is using their a dedicated VLAN, but client traffic uses also their own dedicated VLANs separately. So you can see from the perspective of the switched network, you will see that, for example, the AP management is the VLAN 100, but clients are using VLAN 10, VLAN 20, VLAN 30, etc. You will see all that VLANs in parallel, okay? Because that each of these VLANs is forwarding in a direct mode. Some VLANs are using some number, other VLANs, other VLAN ID, other numbers, but all are in parallel. In channel mode, the channel mode, as I mentioned before, all traffic are using just one VLAN, the AP management or CAPWAP VLAN. Okay, so in a real deployment, you will use some VLANs will be in channel mode and some others could be in direct mode. So you will see some kind of hybrid deployment. Okay, so that's the concepts, the basic concepts that you have to know about deploying a wireless LAN on eNSP. So when you have these things in clear, when you have clarified and defined the things you wanted to do, you could start working with the eNSP. So here we have a topology. Excuse me. Let me change the screen here. So we have a topology here in eNSP. This topology is like a company, like an enterprise network, obviously, like an enterprise network. And we have here the main site of the company, the headquarters, for example. They have switches layer 2, core switch, a layer 3 switch. They have a border router. The border router is most commonly not administered by the company, but administered by the service provider. This is like the one. This switch is emulating the one. And there we have another site. and it's like a branch office. So at the main site, we have these switches and we have access points. Access points deploying a wireless LAN on this switch network. And at the remote side, the branch, we have also an access point, the main screen of eNSP. This is the topology we're working on. So at this place, the left, you have the headquarters. Okay, switches layer 2, switch access switches. This is the core switch, layer 3 functions. A router, border with the one services. This switch here is emulating like the one of the service provider. It's also a layer 3 switch. And this is the branch office, the remote office. At the remote office, we also have a border routers of the service provider. This router is providing some switching services because it has typical switching ports, and we have this access point. So this access point is for the wireless LAN for the remote site, and these access points here are the wireless LAN of the corporate or headquarters network. Okay, so this is a typical deployment we could do in eNSP. So at this lab we will do a hybrid mode because some VLANs we working on a tunnel mode, and others will be working on direct mode. So this is like I am not going to show you the all configuration of this lab because this lab will last hours to do all the things we have here. I will gonna show you the most important parts of this lab in order to you to visualize, to understand what is possible to do in eNSP. Okay. So we will have two wireless LAN. One wireless LAN is the corporate wireless LAN. This will be in direct mode, and we will have another wireless LAN called guests or invited wireless LAN, and this will be in tunnel mode. Okay, so there you have the VLANs we are going to use and the IP subnet that each VLAN uses. Okay, so one of the most important, well, here, excuse me, here I'm going to show you the devices. This is the access point. So at this access point, if you want to see like physically, is this. It's this. Okay, excuse me, view. This is an access point we're working here. Okay, the same here, and here is the switch. Okay, this is the switch, layer 2 switch. If you want to visualize it in a physical view, okay, the switch and the switch layer 3, and this is the router, etc. All the devices here, very typical devices in a enterprise network. Okay. The most important devices here are also of course, the access points and the access controller. The access controller is like a switch. Okay, this is the access controller, or if you want a wireless controller. Okay. What is the most important features we have to visualize here? Well, when we connect the access points needs a DHCP service. So there should be a DHCP server. Well, for the access points, the DHCP server will be the access controller. So at the access controller here, this is the CLI, the command line interface, where you will see that we have a pool, a DHCP pool, and this pool is working exclusively for the access points, not for the clients, just for the access point. So I'm going to display a display current in order for you to see the whole configuration, but I'm going to just look at some point in the configuration. The most important for the moment is a pool. I think here we created a pool called pool AP, and this network is going to define the network for giving IP addresses to the access points. This is the network, this is the subnet mask, this is the default gateway for the access points. This is some excluded ranges. This is totally optional if you want to do some excluded IP addresses or ranges for the access point. And the most important here is the option 43, because with this option, you're telling the access points your controller is 10, 100, 110.1. This is the controller where you have to register. So the access points are going to get an IP address, all the parameters, and they will know the IP address of the controller. Here in this deployment, we're using VLAN 100 for the access points. So access points, the CAP/WAP traffic is using a dedicated VLAN, of course, VLAN 100. And here, because this is layer 3 switch, we are changing that VLAN to 110. So the way to the controller is VLAN 100 and then 110 in this part. So that's why Huawei call this a layer 3 mode, because access points and access controllers are in different VLANs, so you need a layer 3 switch in order to communicate access points with access controllers. It's a layer 3 deployment. Well, you could have a layer 2 deployments in where access points and access controllers are on the same VLAN, but at this example, I put it in different VLAN, layer 3 deployment. Okay, so the access controller, you will see this pool. So, like the DHCP server is in another VLAN, for example. So in this switch, layer 3 switch, if you're using, for example, we're going display current configuration interface. For example, when as we are using VLAN 100 for AP, so we are going to use VLAN 100. Okay, so this is the VLAN interface who is accessing or who is receiving the traffic from the access points. So we have a DHCP relay service here. Okay, that's very important, because this interface is going to receive the DHCP request messages or discover messages from the access point, and it's going to forward all those DHCP requests to the DHCP server, who is the access controller. So we need here a DHCP relay service at the interface. It's very, very important in order to access point to register on the access controller. For example, if at the access controller, if I'm going to see which IP addresses are being assigned to access point, I can see this display, for example, IP pool. The pool is called pool IP. You can pool, yes, IP. Think use, excuse me, display IP pool, yes, okay. Name, of course, pool IP used. So I can see the IP addresses assigned. As this pool is just for IPs, well, I know that these IP addresses are used by APs. I can see the MAC address, etc., the status. This is the IP addresses assigned to IPs. APs, excuse me, access points. So if I want to see at this access controller if the access points are registered or which access point controllers are registered, I could do a display AP all. It's a very simple command in order to visualize the access points registered on the controller. For example, I can see this access point with this MAC address, with this name. This name is configured in other section of the access controller, the group which this access point belongs, and the IP address of this access point. And here we have normal. Normal is because the access point is normally registered on the access controller. This is the another AP, another MAC address, another name. The group would be the same group or another group, and this is the IP address of this AP. So at this point, we can see that all access points in this lab, the 3 access points, are registered on normal way. That's fine, really fine working. Okay, so this is very important, the registration. When you register, okay, the access point, register on the access controller. What the most important features of the wireless LAN are done at the access controller, at the wireless LAN menu. Okay, I'm going to see that in a few minutes. At this moment, I want to show that these links just are trunks. These links just trunks. Which VLANs are passing? Well, VLAN 100, because it's the AP management VLAN, and VLAN 101, because the VLAN 101, that is the VLAN for corporate, are in direct mode. So at this point, for example, if I see the Gigabit Ethernet 001 at the core switch, because I am going to the core switch system view, okay, I'm going to display current interface giga 00, excuse me, 01, okay. I can see that this VLAN is on a hybrid mode, like a trunk, if you want it, it's like a trunk, and it's tagging VLAN 100 and 101. 100 is the CAPWAP VLAN, and one of the VLANs of the clients is the 101. Why I have to pass this VLAN? Because this VLAN is in direct mode. Okay. What about the other VLANs? The VLANs for the guests? Well, that VLANs are not passing directly, are going to pass in a tunnel mode inside the CAPWAP messages. That's why, that is because I don't have to put this VLAN in this port, because that user traffic is going to pass encapsulated or tunneled inside the VLAN 100. Okay. Well, the same configuration for the ports is in this port, everything is the same, because it's just like a trunks. Okay. If you can see the configuration, the ports between the access point and the switch is a trunk. Our link aggregation group in Huawei is an Ethernet trunk or ETH trunk. Well, this ETH trunk is configured also at the access controller. Okay, but at the access controller main features, or the wireless LAN features, because the access controller is like a switch. When you configure the access controller, it's like a switch. It has ports, you have to define VLANs, VLAN interfaces, pools for DHCP services. This is a lot of configuration, but a lot of configuration is by default. Here we have VLAN interfaces with the IP addresses, interfaces trunks, etc., etc. A lot of things like the same like a switch, but the wireless LAN is you have to enter this mode, wireless LAN. And there you will see all the configuration about the wireless LAN services. So here we configure all this by click, and you can see with a display this, you can see the configuration of this section only, the wireless LAN. So I'm going to show you, here we have a lot of things, but I'm going to show you the most important or the critical things in order to learn what things you have to define on the wireless LAN controller. Well, the most important, you have to create the SSID profiles. Yes, because in the LAN you have, for example, a wireless LAN corporate and a wireless LAN guests. So you have to create the SSID, for example, SSID profile name, and we create here per SSID 1 profile. And this profile, SSID wireless LAN corporate. Okay, so this means that access point is going to broadcast, is going to transmit an SSID called wireless LAN corporate. And then we created another profile called profile SSID2, and this profile is called wireless LAN invited or guests. So that means that the access points are going to broadcast another SSID call or another wireless LAN network called wireless LAN invited. So the clients, when with their laptops or their IP phones or their smartphones, they're going to scan the networks, and they will see, oh, I'm going to connect to the corporate, or I'm going to connect to the invited. They will see several wireless LAN networks available. So these networks available, you will broadcast into the network with these profiles. Okay. Another important profile you have to create the wireless LAN controller or wireless access controller is the security profile. At the security profile, you will define the security method or security way that the users from some wireless LAN, the password, which type of password, which type of encryption are going to use in that network. For example, we create here a security profile called profile security 1. Security WPA, WPA2, pre-share key, passphrase, and then the password. Here, the system is showing me the password in an encrypted way. Obviously, I created the password in clear text, but the very simple password, or not so simple, but the system is showing me the password in an encrypted way. So I created a password for the wireless LAN corporate. Here it's just called profile security 1, and here I created another profile for profile security 2 with another password. So I'm going to apply that profile for example, corporate users, and this profile I'm going to apply it for the guest users. So each wireless LAN will have a separate or different kind of security. Okay. Another very important for the configuration of the access controller, there's another important, is when it's a profile called the virtual access point or the VAP profile. The VAP profile. VAP profile here. What is the VAP profile? Well, the VAP profile is very important because you get together a lot of different configurations and you apply it in one thing. You put a common name for that configurations. For example, I created a VAP profile named profile VAP1, and in that profile I associate, for example, the SSID 1, that is for corporate, and associate this profile 1 with the VLAN 101. So I am telling, okay, the corporate users are the VLAN 101, and they are going to use the key defined in the profile security 1. So this is where I get together all these things together. Sorry. So I think, okay, the BAB or virtual access point number 1, I was going to use, okay, the corporate is going to use the VLAN 101, and they are going to use that security. Then I have to define another, excuse me, another profile, the BAB profile 2. And the profile 2, I said, okay, this is the guest profile, and this guest profile is using that security, and this guest profile is using that VLAN. Well, in that case, you see that it appears service VLAN, and it doesn't appear just one VLAN. It appears a VLAN pool. Yes, it is another feature we could use, because in some cases, you will have, for example, for guest or for another kind of devices in the network. In some part of the network, these devices are VLAN 120, and other part of the network on a remote branch, these devices are VLAN 200, or in another branch office, these devices are VLAN 300. So I have to define that this VLAN 110, this VLAN 200 and 300, all are, for example, guests. All these VLANs are for guests. So I have to associate not just one VLAN for a BAP. I want to associate a VLAN pool. So that's why I have this feature VLAN pool, and here says VLAN invited people. So all the invited people are associated with the BAP2. And these VLANs are defined in some place. Here, the place where you define that VLAN pool is outside the wireless LAN menu. I'm going to quit. And I'm going to display the current configuration, and you will see that here we have the VLAN pool defined. VLAN pool invited, and 102 to 103. So the VLANs 102 and 103 all are called now pool VLAN invited. Okay, so when we are going to use we are going to define a wireless LAN service, we're going to enter again to the wireless LAN menu. So when we are going to define, display this. When we're going to define this, the profile associated with the invited is not just one VLAN. This is the VLAN, is a pool, a VLAN pool where you have a lot of VLANs associated with, in this case, the invited. Okay.